very privileged to have Professor Andreas Chai and also Professor Ernest Choo, all the way from Australia, Griffin University, to join us and to speak to us about the role of AI in financial fraud landscape. So thank you so much for your time today.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Earlier at the panel discussion, you talked about two ways that AI is used today in the cybercriminal landscape. One which is AI-enabled cybercrime, the other is adversarial AI. So let's talk about AI-enabled crime, right? So phishing has been around for a long time, right? But now we have deepfakes, we have voice clones, right? The landscape is getting more and more sophisticated.
Absolutely.
And it's like a never-ending cat and mouse game.
It is.
So is the cyber criminals ahead of us in this, cat and mouse game, or, what are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think that the cyber criminals, it's a business now. That's the number one thing, is that they are just doing this in order to make as much money as possible. And AI is a technology that helps them target vulnerable customers. Now, I think in terms of AI-enabled crime, there's a few things where AI can help them. Number one is understanding how to circumvent vulnerabilities. So phishing is a good example of that. But also on the dark web, you've got LLMs with no ethical scruples. So you can go onto the dark web and ask the LLM, Darkbert, or Worm GPT to develop a script that targets a particular customer in a financial institution with a certain age, and it will develop it for you. So that is a major tool that harnesses the power of AI to come up with very detailed scripts that they can then run to target different banks and different vulnerable groups. That's one thing. And then the other thing is the deepfakes. You mentioned the deepfakes, so the technology around that is improving. Yeah, it's a massive boost for them. Are they ahead of us? It depends how stupid we are, right? So it's a cat and mouse game. Right now, I think they're winning. They're definitely, so in Australia alone, Australia lost $2.4 billion to scams, mainly people who are elderly. So every year someone becomes older, they're 4% more likely to become a victim of a scam. But it's not just the elderly, it's also amongst young people, so 18 to 25-year-olds, romance scams, but also crypto investors, people who are looking for high returns. So there's a number of really complex, vulnerable groups. So we need to really understand how we can better educate and make greater awareness about the AI technology there.
Yeah, that's one reason why we are doing the podcast, to raise awareness and spread the education.
So I guess to add on a little bit in terms of, are they ahead of us in terms of AI technology? I don't actually think that they're ahead of us. All of the technology that we've seen, like Fraud GPT, Worm GPT, and those kind of things that are on the dark web, they're actually using existing technologies that we would have used as part of, say, a fintech solution. And I guess the worrying thing is that those technologies, when they're used in fintech companies, are there to make things more efficient, more accurate for the bank or the fintech company. But if the bad guys, the criminals, are using it, it's also making them more efficient, more accurate, more effective.
Yeah, I was going to come to how the good guys are using AI to detect or mitigate some of this risk. But before we come to that, right? So the other side of this AI in the financial crime landscape was adversarial AI, right?
Yep. So
and evasion, of course, is a big part of that.
Yeah. So one of the main uses of AI in the fintech industry is to detect fraud within the systems and track transactions, look for odd and bad behaviours. So one of the aims of the criminals is to evade those AI systems. And they have many different techniques that they can use to do that. So some of the common ones are to actually try to poison the data that's input into the system, to trick the systems into letting them through. So I gave an example before of other AI systems such as automated cars, will take input from signs on the street, lines on the road, or things like that. If someone wanted to cheat that system, they could put a different sign there, or they could deface the sign to make it look like something else. And then the AI system, of course, interprets it in a different way and gets the car to have an accident or something like that. So the same kind of thing could happen with the financial institution systems as well.
Ernest doesn't drive a Tesla, by the sounds of it.
No, I want to drive a Tesla, but I haven't had enough money to actually do it.
Right, of course, there's a few sort of high-profile incidents relating to AI-enabled cars, right? Yeah. But we were just talking about how the criminals are using AI to perpetuate their crimes in a wider scale, more efficiently to a wider victim pool. But how are we using AI? How are we harnessing the power of AI to stop them?
So one of the things that AI gives us is that it allows us to become more efficient, right? So the challenge today in cybersecurity is the amount of data that's coming in through our systems. And it's just so much data that a human can't manually go through everything that happens on the system and to check it. And humans would make mistakes as well. So we're turning to AI systems to help us. I suppose one of the other things is that there's just not enough cybersecurity professionals to do all that manual checking. So we have to use AI, and that's the same for the finance industry as well. Someone usually needs to check transactions that go across and wants to check if there's any suspicious transactions. But there's so many transactions that happen. We can't do it manually, so we need to use AI to give us that efficiency.
But there's a rising concern that some of the traditional signals that we depend on in the detection system, like spelling errors, grammar mistakes, right? Because of Gen AI, the phishing emails are getting more and more credible. So the traditional sort of detection systems are not working as well as in the past.
So it means we got to step up and look at different things, right? So initially the easy route is to look at spelling errors and grammar errors, right? So the next stage though is for someone who analyzes it to look at the logic, right? To look at the logic and additional information and try to piece things together. So the way that a human would determine if a phishing email from a delivery company was fake or not would to be look back and go, am I expecting a package to come through? So you could also train an AI system to also do that. If you give it the information and say, we haven't really ordered anything, but this is coming through, check the logic and the expectations of what's happening. And then if that doesn't line up, flag it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's also about user education and authentication systems, so multi-factor authentication, biometric. What's really happening is there's so much information, and AI is another way to generate even more information. And we, as humans, we're detection tools. And so sometimes we use our logic. Are we expecting something? Or we check, right? So multi-factor authentication is another way. And so what we need to do is just develop other ways in which we can check and educate. And so it could be an ecosystem approach, but most importantly, it's also an education approach. Because a lot of the time, it depends. The weakest link is always the user.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the user is time stressed. So I've fallen for a SMS scam because I was very stressed. I was in a rush. It was late at night. Oh, I've got to pay a bill. Quick, pay the bill. Oh, it turned out to be fake. So it's about thinking of if we're more aware of our own vulnerabilities. Should I be checking emails or SMSs late at night when I'm tired? Probably not. And I think that's what we see over and over again when we do studies of scam victims' vulnerability. It links to deeper issues like how lonely are they? Do they have friends and family? That's a big one because loneliness is a high correlation to romance scams. It's about how much time they spend on their phones and the internet because that also makes them more susceptible. And it's also to do things with like age as well. So do they have enough care and what is their mental health? So I think just stepping back a bit and thinking about time stress that people are under, mental health and these issues, we can get to a better idea about what is the right sort of mental state for us to better detect these things.
So what you're saying is that having a better understanding of our own sort of emotional vulnerabilities.
Yes, correct.
So
correct.
that regardless of the types of technology, the same kind of vulnerabilities exist.
At the end, we're humans, and what these scammers prey on is greed and love.
Yeah.
Right? Greed and love.
And fear.
And fear
FOMO.
and maybe
Right,
so
yeah.
all of these things, what's happening is we tend to respond fast on emotions, and then fear, like, well, how do I stop this quickly? So it's a panic. And so if we are more aware of our emotions and how that connects to our thoughts, then that's really like a great way to think about, I might take the time to think about what you're doing. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. So one of the projects we're working on is a large language model or chatbot for scam victims. So it can help talk through to someone if they think they're being scammed. How do they check? They need somebody to talk to. Maybe a large language model could help there, like a chatbot. And researchers found that humans, because there's a sense of shame about potentially being scammed, we like to actually disclose more information to machines because it's actually another
neutral
person. Like, they're not going to judge you for being an idiot, but they just provide impartial advice. So that's potentially one way where a chatbot can, in real time, talk to someone going, okay, are you sure this person is real? Do you think this investment opportunity is maybe too good to be true? Why don't you check this, check that? Doesn't tell you exactly, this is a scam or not, but it just gets you to think about how to verify and authenticate.
What a great idea.
And the reason why we found this out was when we looked at our student help desks, and when students have problems, they tended to want to be more willing to talk to the chatbot than to talk to a human person, because they didn't want to tell them their problems, but they would tell the chatbot.
What was the first chatbot that was invented in the world in the 1960s? What's the name? Eliza. Eliza, right?
Yeah.
The expert who invented that chatbot.
They were psychologists as well.
Yes, that's right, yeah. And then he made a comment about how his secretary is more willing to talk to the chatbot, Eliza, than to talk to him about problems at work that she has with him.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's quite fascinating. Yes, so that was 50, 60 years ago. But what do you think that will be the evolution of this crime landscape when it comes to financial fraud? We have gone from sort of like email phishing to deepfakes to voice clones. What do you think will be the next kind of how will the landscape look like?
Well, I think there's two parts to this. So you could talk about quantum, but I think one thing I would add is the multiverse. So where the financial system is evolving to is effectively, going into the multiverse. So the multiverse are sort of like these platforms such as Roblox or Minecraft, yeah. So a big issue that the financial system is looking at is how do you buy and sell goods on this? How do you verify identity? And we are seeing a lot of AI being used by suppliers. So you can have a chatbot to a vendor. I think the next thing is maybe what about customers using bots themselves? So maybe you can use a bot to find you the most fashionable clothes every couple of months. It'll choose something for you and it'll go out and buy it for you from an online vendor. So you can program these things. A little bit like Spotify already, it's got a DJ, can choose music for you. Think about that, but in a more expanded retail section. So you can have these autonomous agents you program to go buy things for you. And so that is the next, I think, challenge, because then there's also a question of will that be another vulnerability for scammers?
That's right, yeah.
And how do you authenticate that this bot is really acting on your behalf?
Yeah.
But do you want to talk about quantum?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the advent of quantum computing, it means that a lot of the underlying cryptography that protects our systems nowadays will have to be revised. Do you remember back to year 2000?
Yes.
When we had to change all our
Yeah,
computers?
Y2K.
Yeah, yeah. So it will happen in that when quantum computers become normal, a lot of the algorithms that we use will be insecure. So there will be a period of time, just like at Y2K, where we'll have to switch all our systems over. It might not be a date and time like Y2K was, but there definitely will be a period of time and a period of upheaval for computing systems,
Including blockchain.
especially blockchain.
Oh, right, yeah, especially blockchain. I was going to ask you a question about blockchain and how that, enables cyber criminals and also is also, being used by law enforcement to track down cyber criminals. I'm not sure whether you got any thoughts on that, even though, your panel was about AI.
Yeah, so I mean, blockchain, the technology, even though people say it's anonymous, is not really anonymous in terms of you can still track the transactions through the blockchain, so you can see where that happens. It can get difficult, and so a lot of criminals use blockchain for money laundering and basically hiding the funds. The other thing, the reason why blockchain used in ransomware and other scams is because it's easy for the money to cross borders with blockchain, and also with those kind of technologies, the regulation systems are still immature, and especially not all around the world. So there'll be areas within the world where it's easier to convert the money over. So definitely that's why the criminals flock to that area to use it. And I guess, going into the future, I think regulation has a lot to play with blockchain in terms of tracking the funds, but in particular tracking the funds as they convert from the chain into physical or real monies.
Yeah. I would just add one thing. What we've seen in Australia, and I'm not sure if this is the case in Singapore as well, is we've seen a lot of cases where students see jobs which is like work from home, get paid $50 an hour, and a lot of the times it's about converting money from money into blockchain. In fact, what a lot of that is about is working for transnational money laundering organizations. So what usually happens is they'll give you some money, the students will take that money and convert it into blockchain, but they can keep 5 to 10% of that as their wages. And so we've been working with law enforcement to study this and create information campaigns, because a lot of the time the students might not be aware, but they're actually facilitating illegal flows of money laundering, and they can get arrested for that kind of activity.
So how does it work? So they get approached and to say work from home, you get paid, I don't know, $100. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you get say they'll transfer or they'll give you in cash $1,000 or
into your bank account,
or they'll put into a bank account, or they'll literally give you money, because a lot of this is drug money, so it needs to be so they'll have to go deposit it, and once it's deposited, then they'll have to convert it to blockchain and send it to certain addresses, and then they get to keep some percentage of that money.
Oh, so they're kind of like money mules.
They're money mules, yes. A lot of the times they'll target certain banks. They'll check which banks are asking questions. Theoretically, all banks should be asking questions. Where's this money coming from?
Yeah.
Please explain what this is for. What's the purpose? But if they look around, maybe they'll find ways around that. And as a result of that, they'll do this in small scales, smaller numbers.
It definitely happens for tourists and for international students, because they have a reason for bringing money into the country or moving money around, because maybe they're going to start studying for 3 years and they have some money they need to convert into the host nation's country. So it could be legitimate, but it could also be quite easily like, someone approaches them and says, well, can you add an extra however many thousand, send it to my friend. Yeah.
And then the other thing is there's also an illegal market for bank accounts. So some international students, if they're coming to Singapore or Australia, but then going back, once they no longer need the bank account, there is a market for them to sell their password and access to those bank accounts to transnational organizations who will then use those accounts to pass money through.
Which is also dangerous because the bank account is under that person's name.
Yep.
So if that bank account ever gets identified as being used in money laundering, then the person who originally owned it is responsible. And so they will get charged.
Yeah. So there needs to be more awareness in terms of some of these situations taking place and how you could be targeted, and what are the potential, I guess, penalties or law enforcement actions that could be taken against you if you are caught, right?
Absolutely.
Because I guess a lot of students would think, right, it's just
it's
a
not
few
money.
$1,000
They make a little bit of money.
Right, on the
What's
side.
the big deal?
Right, yeah.
And they might think it's not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
But it really is enabling the criminals to profit off their crimes.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
This money is related to crime, so it's enabling criminals to profit from selling drugs or loan sharking from gamblers, and it has a real social impact.
That's right, yeah. And earlier you were talking about education and raising awareness. So can you tell us a bit about what are the big challenges when it comes to educating, the general public or even students on some of these?
Yeah, look, it's really hard. Let's take the case of romance fraud or pig butchering scams. What we see there is, an amazing amount of time invested by scammers to build up personal relationships with the victim for a very long time, and it's very hard to intervene. So we've talked to people who try and, from the banks, they warn the victims, do you really want to send this money? Are you sure? And try and develop scripts to use to try and explain to them that this is actually not who you think it is, but it's very, very hard because of that emotional connection. So it's a really big challenge, and again, coming back to the point we made, I think what we really need to look at is not just, what makes a victim, but taking a step back and seeing the vulnerability of victims being a combination of loneliness or greed or sort of internet addiction, and finding ways in which we can reduce loneliness, provide a sort of network of support, or even just advice like the chatbot that can sort of provide that advice when it's needed in real time in a way that people feel safe and comfortable talking about these issues. Because the number one problem is shame.
Yes.
So people feel ashamed about being a victim. We've all been, or we know someone who's been a victim. So actually it's not a shame at all because everyone can be a victim, but it's embarrassing. And I think we as a society, maybe journalism as well, when you see media reports of investment scams or romance scams, it's always like talks about the victims like they were stupid, the perpetrators as being smart.
Yes.
But we need to change this. We need to say, well, it's not about being stupid or smart. This is actually just about systematic vulnerabilities. And we need to think about better technologies and better systems of support. I think that's ultimately the answer to these things.
When you say better technologies, what do you mean?
Well, for example, the chat.
Okay,
the
chatbot.
chatbot.
Right. Okay.
But also warnings, real-time warnings that
okay.
tracking where the money is going, hopefully recovering it, and social media. So one of the key gateways in all of this is Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere where you can talk to strangers. These kind of social media platforms must step up, and they have a responsibility to do proper due diligence in KYC, because that's a huge gateway through which you can set up fake accounts and target vulnerable customers. That's
right, yeah. And when it comes to financial institutions, I guess that to a certain extent they have a role to play as well, because when they onboard some of these criminal organizations, perhaps if the KYC process had been more robust, perhaps or the ongoing anti-money laundering monitoring system is more regular and sophisticated, they could have spotted some of these patterns, right, related to
it's a challenge because, going back to the romance scam example, if the customer really wants to send the money and they're sure of it, then the financial institution has an obligation to do what the customer says. And so they may warn them, they may say, hey, this is not who you think it is, this looks like a scam, but at the end of the day, if the customer is committed to sending that money, they're going to send that money. So it's a real challenge, and I think it comes back to trust, and the know your customer process is also about better relationships with banks and their customers. So building up a personal relationship where the customer takes the advice of the bank and vice versa, the bank listens to the customer.
Right. I think it's a very complex topic, as we know. We all know phishing has been around for what? Social engineering has been around for decades, right? And it's a profitable business, like you were saying, for the criminals. And we all have vulnerabilities and human vulnerabilities. So I think it's a very, very complicated and complex issue to tackle. But I guess spreading awareness and podcasts like this is like one way of, hopefully bring people's attention to, hey, we need to maybe pay more attention to some of the emotional vulnerabilities that we have and tackle it from that way rather than relying on our manual detection efforts to detect deepfakes or voice clones, right? Perhaps detect our own vulnerabilities first.
Yeah, and if it's also a great opportunity to do further studies. So at Griffith, we've done undergraduate and masters in financial crime investigation and compliance, because we need more people to become experts at studying this phenomena. And there's a lot of jobs in banks and police agencies around investigating this. So we definitely need to train a new generation of people who know how to use AI, who can follow the money and help report suspicious behavior. So in case any of your listeners are interested, we have a Masters of Financial Crime Investigation and Compliance at Griffith University. And we also have a cybersecurity degree. Is that when's that? Is that launching next year?
Yeah, we already have one.
You've got a new one?
Started beginning of this year, a Bachelor of Cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Yeah. Okay. So maybe some of the audience will sign up, or I myself may sign up.
Definitely.
On a part-time basis.
Right. Sounds good.
Okay, great. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today. To share with us on the role of AI and also blockchain and quantum in the financial crime landscape. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.